ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet and greet Thomas, the attorney. Thomas, going after Fauci. Reds!
I'll be done in an hour. I got news tonight, ladies and gents. So we've been working since May, June-ish on something that I've been waiting, but it's taken us forever. This was tough to put together. But we finished our report this week on the origins of COVID-19. Now, we all thought we knew that it came from the Wuhan. And I got to tell you, we sent some down to Washington this week. We're going to send some more this coming week. And I'm hoping that once we make this public, you guys will help continue sending it to Washington because Anthony Fauci belongs in jail. And a few other people I'm going to tell you about here in a minute. So we're going to kind of fly through this because Clay told me I only have 2 hours. By the way, if you watch the weekly podcast, the Clay Yoval Noah Harari fan club is, I mean, we're getting ready to, I'm kidding. I'm just teasing Clay because I love this guy. Okay, so we're going to go to the first slide. Guess who was right? The Donald Trump was right. In April, May of 2020, he said, hey, I think this was created in a lab in Wuhan, China. Anthony Fauci and a bunch of other people then conspired to try and make him look stupid, just like they tried to do on the HCQ and other things. But guess what? Trump was right. So was Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, Jim Jordan, and a bunch of other guys who have stood up against this and who are trying to hold these people accountable. So we put the report together, which is on my website, rens-law.com. And that report is going to be available. Our goal was to essentially help these guys get what they needed to file some charges, honestly, criminal charges. They want it, there it is. They want to know if Fauci created this in a lab, here you go. So our report has 133 citations, and it has a whistleblower, Dr. Andrew Huff, a veteran who served as an infantryman, who has a PhD in environmental epidemiology that I didn't even know was a thing. He has a master's in security. He worked at Sandia Labs, you know, that one. So he's about as smart as you get, right? He worked for EcoHealth Alliance also while they created SARS-CoV-2 in the lab, and he's given me this testimony under penalty of perjury. Our report, ladies and gentlemen, can be broken down into 5 major categories. There's a whole bunch more, and if you can get through it without passing out, I congratulate you. It's tough reading. And by the way, let me thank Make Americans Free Again and Dr. Andrew Huff. MAFA and Dr. Huff made this possible. We could not have done this without them. So please support MAFA and Dr. Huff. So, point 1, yes, SARS-CoV-2 was created in a lab in Wuhan, China, and that lab did not have proper safety protocols and procedures, and we could not verify that they had those, right? They called it a BSL-4 lab, they call it all these things, but here's the thing. We couldn't verify it. And EcoHealth Alliance didn't have the right people employed. They're supposed to have biosafety personnel involved with this, right? Biosafety committee, biosafety officer. These are the rules for the grants that they didn't follow. We all see how well that worked out. Fauci also lied. Wait, I know, hold on. I know you're shocked. But he lied to Congress under oath when he said that they didn't do gain of function work. They didn't fund it. We're going to hit that in a minute. The U.S. intelligence community Have you noticed there's been some suppression of information related to SARS-CoV-2 and the vaccines and everything else? We think they have some ties. We're gonna enlighten you on that. We talk about that. We talk about partners, well-connected partners, public-private. A few people you might have heard of, like Google, Rockefeller Foundation. Now, mind you, we don't have evidence that they committed a crime. We have evidence that they've been involved with things that we think warrant investigation because, according to the WHO, 6.8 million people have died globally from this disease. 6.8 million. We've got a January 6th committee when the only person that died there was a protester that got shot. We went through Melania's underwear drawer, our FBI did, over January 6th. But we don't seem to want to investigate 6.8 million dead. I'm going to come back to that. Fauci and others, they coordinated the cover-up. This isn't new information, but we've put it together in a way that's nice and coherent. So next slide. Yes, it was created in the lab. How do we know? Well, we got Huff's testimony. That's pretty good, since he worked for him and he said unequivocally, yes, they created this in the lab while I worked there. That works for me. We also, throughout this, what we did was we wanted to verify things. We wanted to make sure that this stuff was correct. So we tried to verify as much of this as humanly possible with extra sources, outside sources, and consistently throughout this. The stuff that Huff gave us, the paperwork he gave us, and outside sources corroborated his information. One of the things that is not commonly known, but I think is very critical is, you know that Moderna company? Well, I don't love patents always as evidence because having a patent doesn't mean that you've used a patent. But in this particular case, the Moderna patent is a genetic match for part of the genetic code in the spike protein. Some scientists did a study on the likelihood of that occurring. 1 in a billion. 1 in a billion. Shocking coincidence, huh? Why did they cover up the investigation? Why did they need to cover it up? Why did they try and discredit anybody who was suggesting that there was a lab leak? If the lab leak wasn't a thing, right? If this was from nature, why would Fauci try and suppress this? Why would Peter Daszak try and suppress this? You don't hide stuff you don't have anything to hide, do you? By the way, not on the slides, but in the report, Fauci had a very suspicious teleconference with a bunch of people who were talking about this being lab leak. Before the conference, their monthly funding was about $393,000. After the conference, they suddenly quit talking about lab leaks, said it was natural, but their funding went up to $800,000 a month. There's nothing to see here, folks. No corruption. Don't worry about it. Next slide. We're going to be quick on this. Gain of function. I've talked about this. What's gain of function? In this case, with a virus, I'm going to boil it down real quick and real simple. We had a 5-hour hearing in the Senate over this. Let me show you this in about 30 seconds. We know that EcoHealth Alliance, because they admitted it in their paperwork and filings, experimented on coronavirus and coronavirus-type things in a lab in Wuhan, China. Those experiments altered the functionality of those viruses. If you alter the functionality of a virus through an experiment in a lab, and that virus gains function, that's gain of function. Okay? By the way that they altered it, one of the things that's critical here was the insertion of the spike protein. SARS-CoV-2 without the spike protein doesn't transmit to humans very well. With the spike, well, I said 6.8 million dead. Next slide. Should Fauci be in jail or investigated criminally for perjury? Well, here's some evidence on it, right? And I got the quote there. But I asked a question in this that I haven't heard asked before. Why, if EcoHealth Alliance wasn't doing gain-of-function work in Wuhan, why did they get an exemption for gain-of-function work in Wuhan? I don't know. I mean, I'm not as smart as Anthony Fauci, so I don't know the answer to that. By the way, the Menagerie paper, which is the last paper listed there, it's a paper that they wrote in 2015 that was published in a peer-review journal, which means that it's gospel, by the way. They talk about the gain-of-function work that they did. So, I mean, perjury, anybody? Next slide. There's a couple things going on here, but there's two things that I'm going to focus on. So you can read the report. There's some stuff about the Rockefeller Foundation and Google, and we know about their censorship, those sorts of things. And we need the next slide. But the two areas that I want to focus on, because I really am looking forward to my FBI visit, the Biden family and the intelligence community. Okay. So, the intelligence community, we have, through Andrew Huff, an IARPA pitch deck showing that EcoHealth Alliance was doing work in and with the intelligence community. CIA, DIA, that crew, right? Huff has testified under penalty of perjury that the CIA had approached Peter Daszak, about working with them. There's a lot of stuff going on that points towards the intelligence community being involved in this, and it explains a lot if you think this through. One of the things, though, that I think is most important is I want you guys to ask yourself this. Gain-of-function work is super technical and super complex. It's not something that everybody in the world knew how to do. To do the work that we did in Wuhan, China, you had to transfer very difficult, complex technology to that lab. The Chinese Communist Party's been talking about using biowarfare against the United States since the 90s. Yet we still decided to transfer this information to a lab in Wuhan, China that was ultimately controlled or infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party, and to do gain-of-function work there to train them so that they could do whatever they needed to do this work against us in the future. Or maybe coronavirus was the future, I don't know. But here's the thing, does anybody believe that we transferred that technology without our intelligence agencies knowing? That's insane. Who would believe that? It's absurd. Of course they knew, but why did they okay it? By the way, there's funding ties with In-Q-Tel, with all sorts of other groups. In-Q-Tel, I thought was a conspiracy theory, because I'd always heard In-Q-Tel, well, they're a front for the CIA. I thought that was conspiracy theory, until I found on one of the US government websites, In-Q-Tel is an investment group for the CIA. They really are. I was shocked. By the way, we saved that, so if they scrub that, when they scrub that, now that we've talked about it, we've got a copy. So I think our intelligence community knew, which would go a long ways to explaining why they've worked so hard across the government to make sure that no one looked at that. I also want to talk about Hunter Biden, who happened to be invested with Rosemont Seneca. Rosemont Seneca put a big investment in with Metabiota. Metabiota was a listed partner working with EcoHealth Alliance on this. Now let me ask the question. it's going to result in a visit from the FBI. Did Hunter Biden make money off of the creation of SARS-CoV-2? And if 650 million plus people around the world have died from SARS-CoV-2, don't we have a right to know that? P.S. Has the President of the United States used his powers or position to in any way, shape, or form stifle any investigation into whether or not his son made money, off the creation of a disease that killed 650 million people? Or 6.5 million, I'm sorry, I misspoke. But the bottom line here is this. 6.5 million are dead around the world. We're worried about January 6th. I want to know 6.5 million are dead around the world. We're worried about January 6th. I want to know now. We've given the report. We've put it on a silver platter. We're giving it to Rand Paul. We're giving it to Senator Johnson. We're giving it to these guys. Okay. You got what you need. I want to see criminal charges for Anthony Fauci. I want to see criminal investigations on Hunter Biden. I want to see criminal investigations on the president. I want to know what happened. We have a right to know. Millions of people around this world are dead because these guys decided to experiment in a lab and to create a disease that they couldn't control because they thought they were God. Ladies and gentlemen, we've put it together. We've given it to these people. It's now their duty to investigate this and put these guys in jail. We volunteer our time to help them should they choose to do so. Thank you.
Thomas Ren.